It's gone a bit downhill since I last saw you guys. That's pretty much everything. I've fallen on tough times. I let the Hotline Miami video get to my head, and I thought I was someone. I thought I was someone big. I thought I'd make it. But I clearly let it get to my head. I don't fucking want it anymore. Hey, this actually reminds me of Dead Rising 2 off the record. Clean this up. I got fucking bare feet now. If you remember from last time, Dead Rising 3 is kind of the point in the franchise where everyone starts to go, alright, it's kind of falling off a little bit here, but I think it's important to talk about a game that most people wouldn't want to admit is probably also a part of the downfall of Dead Rising. Dead Rising 2 off the record. Initially, when talking about Dead Rising 2, I intended to cover every aspect about it, including the prologue, epilogue, and off the record. But as time went on and I realized how comically long that video was getting, I also realized I had a lot more to say about off the record than I initially thought. So, I thought it also deserved its own video and analysis. Don't worry, just because I've fallen on hard times doesn't mean you haven't got the classic 2007 gamer style. Still got the green screen. Look at that! I still got it! Off the Record was first revealed on April 12th, 2011 at Captivate 11, later released that year on October 11th. It functions as a what-if scenario type game, where instead of Chuck Green being at the center of the Fortune City outbreak, it's now Frank West, the original protagonist. It's a non-canon reimagining of Dead Rising 2's story, showcasing what Frank would have done if he were the star of the show. Off the Record was conceptualized based off of a contract that Blue Castle Games, now known as Capcom Vancouver, had with Capcom Japan. Within a year of Dead Rising 2's release, there was to be yet another Dead Rising game in the form of a director's cut for Dead Rising 2. Capcom Vancouver, seeing the success that director's cuts had brought to other Capcom games, wanted to bring that success to Dead Rising. But when they revealed Dead Rising 2 initially, they realized that they had an interesting opportunity. The main critique of Dead Rising 2 when it was first revealed was that Frank West was no longer the protagonist. People were basically crying and screaming and demanding Frank West to come back. And Capcom Vancouver realized that they could capitalize on that. They already had the full map ready to go, and they likely already planned to get TJ Rotolo in the booth for Dead Rising 2 Case West, so why not make better use of that time? And so, Dead Rising 2 Director's Cut was reimagined as Dead Rising 2 Off the Record. Like I said, Off the Record is a non-canon reimagining of Dead Rising 2, just with Frank West as the protagonist now. There are some changes to the story here and there, but it's largely the same. This time, instead of being a loving father who's taking care of your daughter and just survived a zombie outbreak that took your wife, you're now just a washed up, has-been photojournalist who no one even cares about anymore. Can't relate. The prologue of the game shows that Frank experienced immense success after Dead Rising 1. He exposed the truth, he became a well-known photojournalist across the globe, and everyone loved him, and he was dedicated to telling the truth and exposing it where possible. But along the way, the fame got to his head, and now he's just a washed-up has-been looking to get back into the game. He views Terror is Reality as a way to get back in the game, as a game show dedicated to killing immense amounts of zombies must have a way to make more of them, right? He goes on the show, competes, wins the prize money, they call him infertile, old and fat. As he's trying to leave, he hears some commotion coming from a restricted area, which sends his photojournalistic senses into overdrive. The setup to the Fortune City outbreak, of course, is slightly different. Instead of the blame being pinned solely on Chuck, now Frank finds out that TK orchestrated this by paying off a member of Cure to set off the bomb, tricking him and thinking that he's doing the right thing because he's, Frank gets confronted by some goons, tries to leave, gets confronted by Amber and Crystal, they call him infertile.
Your performance was a little limp tonight, Frank. You must have to take pills for that at your age.
Can relate. He helps in the elevator. In the same vein as Dead Rising 2, bomb goes off, zombies get loose, a lot of people die, Frank finds his way to the safe house, and now the game can really begin. In terms of its setting and aesthetic, there's not really a lot to discuss here. It still suffers a lot of the problems that I feel were present in the original Dead Rising 2. It can't lean much into the horror aspects because the setting itself doesn't really allow it to. It's a 24/7 city where things don't get dark enough to really feel scary, and overall just taking a bit of a sillier approach. It was fine enough, and Fortune City is still fun, but in terms of atmosphere and tone, nothing really comes close to the Willamette Mall. However, there is an addition in Dead Rising 2 Off the Record that, quite simply, is the most out of place addition they possibly could have done that amplifies all my previous grievances.
I'm going to Uranus Zone!
I fucking hate Uranus Zone. Uranus Zone is a really weird addition. Hey, I'm at least happy of the fact that it's not another fucking casino, but that doesn't change the fact that it's a really out of place and weird addition. It feels really ham-fisted in. You know, they make a big song and dance about it in the trailers and whatnot, but in the game, they give you almost no legitimate reason to even go there. There are precisely 4 missions that take place in Uranus Zone. 4. That's it. The only other reason you might have to go into Uranus Zone is to interact with the rides, which can be fun, but they wear off pretty quickly. Uranus Zone feels so out of place, and it's very clearly just meant for the game's new Sandbox mode, which we'll get into later. Uranus Zone is the exemplification of every problem I've had with Dead Rising 2's aesthetic times 10. It's bright, it's gaudy, it doesn't let the game lean into the horror elements, and overall, just feels so fucking out of place. At the safe house, Frank and Stacy see Rebecca Chang reporting on the outbreak. As she does, she reports that a member of Cure had set off the bomb, which rightly pisses Frank off because Stacy, if you remember, is the leader of Cure. However, because Frank doesn't believe everything he sees on TV, he feels that something isn't right, and he goes to confront Rebecca about it in person. The story plays out pretty similarly here up until case 2-2, where now Brandon has been promoted to a mandatory story boss fight. Fucking good for you, Brandon. Fucking good for you, Brandon. His fight now takes place inside of Uranus Zone instead of the Americana Casino. They need to give you some reason to go there, right? From this point on, it plays out pretty similarly up until case 5-1, where instead of meeting with Rebecca's source immediately, now it's revealed that she's been kidnapped, and TK is demanding a $1 million ransom to set her free. He demands you bring it to the Shoal nightclub, you fight the twins there, free Rebecca, and the story's pretty much the same up until the very end, where it kinda just goes off the fucking rails. Case 7-3 in the original revealed that Sullivan was the traitor, fatally executing Rebecca as she tried to call for help. This has been changed in Off the Record in case 8-3 to reveal that Stacy was the traitor the whole time now. She shoots Rebecca in the abdomen before fatally shooting Sullivan. As she tries to escape, Frank tries to grab onto her ponytail, which is revealed to be fake. There's now an entire section where Frank has to run around Fortune Park destroying queen harvesters to put a stop to Stacy's plan. After doing so, Stacy will taunt Frank and tell him to come to Uranus Zone for the final showdown. He gets to Uranus Zone, and instead of fighting him one-on-one in a fist fight to the death, she's piloting a giant fucking robot that shoots fireworks that double as missiles. Stacy gets crushed by the robot, Frank calls for help, multiple endings play out, they're pretty much all the same, overtime mode returns, pretty much the same. Now it's Frank saving Rebecca because she got shot in the abdomen, not the head, so she's actually alive. Frank beats the shit out of TK, has the worst one-liner in the history of one-liners.
Risk it all if you're ever really gonna
Fall to your death!
get the fuck out!
Frank saves Rebecca, they go off to have hot reporter sex, cue the jump scare, game end. I have no real issue with the story considering it's pretty much the same up until case 8-3, where the game not only jumps the shark's not even in the same fucking universe anymore with how far this shit jumped. I can appreciate the twist being changed to try and keep things fresh and interesting, but what they do with it is absolutely so ridiculous and just not the right call. I've even seen some people say that they prefer the Stacy twist over Sullivan, which I just don't fucking understand. at all. I think this mainly harkens back to what I said about Stacy in Dead Rising 2. She didn't really get a lot of exploration. There are hints here and there, sure, but it's really hard to compete when we have Rebecca eating the entire fucking scenery every time she's on screen like a fat fucking hog. They give Stacy something here, but just because it's something doesn't necessarily mean it's good. Making her a sexy latex secret double agent is already laughably over the top, but the whole piloting a killer robot thing, yeah, we'll fucking get to that. But for now, this twist, while different, isn't necessarily good, and I think people are only saying that it is good because they expected it to be Sullivan again. Story-wise, Off the Record doesn't change too much, and anything it does change, for the most part, is fine. Most of the changes in Off the Record come in the gameplay anyway. And while I absolutely fucking hate the changes that were made to Stacy, every other character in the game is largely unchanged. Except for Frank West. In Dead Rising, Frank West was characterized by his immense determination to get the scoop, and take the risks in order to get that scoop. He goes through a genuine hero's journey, with the call to Willamette presenting many challenges for him, namely the fucking zombies. Initially, he even questions Brad's idea of going back out there, a refusal to that call of adventure. Once he gets to know Brad a bit more, effectively his mentor, he crosses that initial threshold of fear and faces numerous tests along the way. Throughout this journey, that sense of determination is extended to saving others and exposing the truth. It's all well and good to break the story of an outbreak, but it's an entirely different thing to expose the truth behind it. He enters the story a hot-headed, underhanded, hotshot paparazzi, invading the privacy of others, to experiencing a rebirth of purpose, wanting to save others and do the right thing. This culminates in Frank getting to escape Willamette and return to civilization with the truth, and reveal to the world the Santa Cabeza incident. He's a changed man by the end of the game, hardened by his experiences, and since then, really dedicates his life to trying to get the public to realize these outbreaks are dangerous. No shit. And a result of the government tampering too much with the laws of nature. He takes the whole thing seriously. In the E3 trailer for Off the Record, they show Frank doing this. This is not the same character, at all. Frank was portrayed as a sort of scrappy survivalist who was willing to get his hands dirty to get the job done, but also highly adaptable. In Off the Record, he's portrayed like a one-man army, unstoppable, too confident for his own good, and pretty much just a B-tier action hero. He's presented here more as a parody of himself. The image of Frank West that a lot of people have in their heads, the "yeah, funny, I've covered wars, you know" guy. He is not presented even half as seriously as he was in the original. It barely feels like the same character. He's snarky, he's overly sarcastic, he's dropping one-liners after Psychopath death, which he genuinely never did that before. People will sit there and say, "Yo, wasn't it so funny when Frank sat down in front of Stacy at the end of the game in front of a big speech?" Which, that scene perfectly exemplifies how fucking butchered Frank's personality and writing is in this game. This is simply something this character would not fucking do. Imagine if at the end of Carlito's speech in the first game, when he's about to die, Frank just starts fucking mocking the cunt. Wah, wah, wah. Give me the fucking key, dickhead. To be fair, I enjoy the idea of him being a washed up has-been. It puts him back to square one. But I really don't think that Frank West would let the fame get to his head. He seems pretty determined to do the right thing at all accounts, and having him succumb to the fame getting to his head just feels really out of character. Even in the canon comic Road to Fortune, Frank doesn't seem like the type of person to let the fame get to his head. He's always doing whatever he can to try and get the truth exposed, but is bogged down by getting crappy jobs by his agent. The fact that he doesn't seem to be taking a single second of this seriously defies everything we know about Frank West. Oh, but he's older and he's more snarky. You get snarkier as you get older. He's more experienced. Of course he'd be a bit sarcastic about the situation. Wrong! You know how I know you're wrong? Case fucking West. While he is a little sillier, he is written miles closer to his true personality than whatever the fuck is going on here in Off the Record. The difference is night and fucking day. I think the problem stems from the fact that Capcom always felt pressured to bring this guy back, but when they did, they only brought the character back. They didn't bring back the writing or the personality that we came to love. They put a Frank West model on screen so we can all point and gawk and go, oh my god, Frank West is back, before realizing that is not Frank West. At least he's fucking actually voiced by TJ Rotolo. That's something. It sounds like Frank, it looks like Frank, but good god, it does not fucking act like Frank. I saw a Reddit comment that said if they didn't get TJ Rotolo back to voice Frank for Off the Record, people would immediately notice how off he is in this game, or even just straight up fucking hate him. And I think they're right. If TJ Rotolo wasn't here voicing Frank, I do not think Off the Record would be held in as high regard as it is. The bottom line, Frank West in this game is not my Frank West. At all. But how's the gameplay? I got a Pokestop outside my house. Off the Record has had some tweaks to update some of the more annoying aspects of the original, but most of the changes have actually made the game way harder. In terms of its core mechanics, like the combo weapons, there isn't really much different to it, there's just some new additions. I'm taking this fucking shit off. Dead Rising 2 had 50 combo weapons, and Off the Record bumps this up to 65, adding in some of the ones from Case West and some totally new ones as well. Like the laser eyes, which is a pretty cool one, and the super massager. If you have any idea on how to make this, you need to contact me immediately.
Nice.
They're fine enough. Laser eyes is fun, if not extremely fantastical, but again, lightsaber and stuff like the laser gun is actually a really cool concept because it requires you to make it using 2 other combo weapons, which is really cool, and I really like that. It's nice that there's more to make, but there's not really much to say. The core idea of it didn't change much. Since you're playing as Frank, you have access to his original moveset from Dead Rising 1, which is pretty cool. And now, thanks to the updated control scheme of Dead Rising 2, most of these moves are far easier to pull off. Leveling itself, however, doesn't really change that much. The Zombrex mechanic is still present, but since Katie isn't in the game, the person who now acquires Zombrex every day is Frank himself. The key difference is, since you're playing as Frank, and Frank is the guy that needs the Zombrex, that means you can take the Zombrex anywhere. You don't have to run back to the safe house every day to give Katie the Zombrex, you can just I'm fucking tweaking! And you're good to go. This is actually a big reason as to why so many people prefer Off the Record over 2, and while it's definitely convenient, like I said in my last video, it was not as bad as you remember it. The transceiver has also been updated to now be an earpiece, hands-free, so now you can answer calls anytime, anywhere, and you're still fully mobile and able to attack. Long gone are the days of running around in circles listening to what Otis has to say during a boss fight. It's a great change, and it's one of those things that I'm not upset is gone. Another convenience is the addition of checkpoints. Now, when Frank transitions into a new area, it automatically sets a checkpoint. So now, if Frank dies, instead of needing to load a save that you haven't touched in maybe 4 hours, you can just load a checkpoint and you're good to go. This can be really helpful when fighting psychopaths or escorting survivors, as if you fail and die or they die, you can just respawn from the checkpoint and try again. It's a nice addition and it definitely makes the game a tad easier, but I think this is also to compensate for how much more difficult the game is now. The biggest changes come in how psychopaths and survivors were changed to be much more challenging than how they were presented in 2. Survivors in Dead Rising 2 are basically all damn near they're basically self-sufficient, requiring little to no monitoring in order to escort them safely back to the safe house. Off the Record changes this and makes them a lot more like they were in Dead Rising 1. Incompetent, frustrating, and they fucking die if you take your eyes off them for 2 picoseconds. They have far less health than what they did in the original. They take damage rapidly when they're grabbed now, so you can't just hope for the best and hope another zombie hits them out of the grab. You actually have to give a shit now. It's actually way worse than what it was in Dead Rising 1, because now there are just so many zombies to deal with. You are more likely to kill the survivor than anything when you're trying to help them. It also feels like they are just far stupider as well. It is so frustrating to escort survivors and off the record, and I like it. Yeah, I fucking said it. I liked it. And I loved it! Survivors shouldn't be easy to escort. It takes away a huge part of what makes Dead Rising what it is, and dumbs down a massive part of what makes the game so memorable in the first place. The survivors you help in the game are a massive part of the feel of Dead Rising 1, and with the limited knowledge on how to breathe and walk properly without bursting into fucking tears, it made for a good challenge that kept the game fun and engaging. But in Dead Rising 2, they join my party, run to their transition zone, and know they're gonna make it, rinse repeat to at the safe house. You don't have to do fucking shit. So, when Off the Record changes this so you actually do have to give a shit, great. I love it. Actually give me a reason to care and view them as actual people. Do I get annoyed by them? Obviously I do. Do I get frustrated? Of course. But I'd much rather that I'm annoyed and frustrated with them rather than not giving a shit. Maybe I'm just fucked up and weird like that. Huh? Maybe I'm just fucked up and weird. Maybe I got a fucked up mind. Maybe I'm dark and twisted. I got a weird fucked up. Psychopaths got some changes that make them stick around for a little bit longer than how they did in 1 and the original. Then off the record, they actually end up having less health. They also have been given a damage cap that gets applied to them once they take a certain amount of damage. This kind of forces you to back off and wait for the cap to piss off before going back in. It is such a simple change, yet so effective. It makes Psychopaths stick around for a little while longer, and makes you actually think a bit more about your strategy, instead of just throwing your whole fucking body weight at the guy or LMG mag dumping on them. Psychopaths have also been made to react faster to attacks, meaning, at a point, it starts looking like a fucking Three Stooges routine. It makes it harder to play safe or formulate strategies, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. They're meant to be challenging after all. There are 3 exclusive Psychopaths to Off the Record. While the other 2 are pretty cool, there's only one that I really want to talk about that just... Since Sullivan is no longer the traitor, our final fight is with Stacy, and I hate it a lot. We know the story. Stacy shoots Rebecca in the gut, shoots Sullivan, tries to escape, fake ponytail. Now we're at Uranus Zone for the final fight. Frank makes his way to Uranus Zone, where Stacy's now in her secret agent latex sexy gear. And then she just kind of blatantly says that Frank killed a lot of people, which... Like, no he didn't. And he rightly refutes, saying that genuinely doesn't make any fucking sense. There's an attempt at a Sullivan-style monologue here, but doesn't even come close. Sullivan's monologue works so well because it puts into perspective why they feel this needed to happen. It's all well and good to just say, well, people need Zombrex, but to add in doctors, politicians, and CEOs, and some of the country's best and brightest are in need of Zombrex, it adds that perspective to the situation. Additionally, the personal dig at Chuck reminding him that Katie would be dead if not for Zombrex is a moral dilemma that adds another layer to it. Sure, you want to stop Phenotrans, but if you stop us, your daughter will die, and you may expose the truth to the world, but your personal world will crumble due to you exposing it. There's a lot of justification that Sullivan pulls out to absolve himself and Phenotrans of any guilt. Stacy just says,
This is about saving lives!
I guess, you know, it's very basic and very simple. There's not a lot of depth to it. There's no fucking depth to it, but, I guess. Stacy says she had a feeling he would show up, which, I don't know, you fucking told him where you were before the final fight happens. Now, I haven't really talked about this all too much, but a great psychopath for me in Dead Rising is one that doesn't go too far out of the realm of possibility while still feeling a little wacky. Generally, for me, you can find the ratio of real to wacky by describing them in one sentence. And if that sentence sounds too far, then I think we've got an imbalance. As some examples, Mole clown that went insane after watching his adoring audience get ripped apart by zombies, now using the mole roller coaster to keep the zombies away. Tragic, but also, he's a clown. A war veteran that saw his granddaughter get eaten alive, triggering his PTSD to make him think he's back in the Vietnam War. Tragic. Vegas magician duo practicing during the outbreak who can't take criticism of the work. Edging it a little bit, but still pretty good, and slightly believable. Double agent controlling a giant park robot. You see what I mean? Stacy's piloting the giant robot in Uranus Zone, using the robot to slam into the ground to try and squish Frank like the fucking insolent bug! Once the arms are in the ground, Frank can attack certain spots on the arm. Basically the big fucking bright neon blue hit me here signs. Once you take down one of its health bars, yes it has multiple, we go to phase 2, where they become faster, they throw boxes at you, and it's just overall a tad harder. Once you take down the second health bar, we get to phase 3, which switches it up yet again. Nearby crates are broken to reveal some fucking... I don't even know, some giant fucking activators that fire fireworks off again. I fucking don't even know. Frank will need to climb up on top of them, knee drop them to activate the switches, which will stun the robot. This gives Frank the opportunity to run over to the robot and hop into the robot to do a QTE with Stacy. Rinse and repeat. Done. Frank punches Stacy over the edge of the robot, only for her to re-emerge shortly after and grab Frank in his no-no area to pull him out of the robot. Back on the ground floor, Frank is being held at gunpoint by Stacy before noticing that the robot seems to be falling over and getting out of the way before getting squished. This leaves Stacy to get squished like the fucking insolent bug that she is. Before taking her transceiver, calling Channel 6 Action News to get extracted over time, yeah, whatever. I do not like this fight at all. I think it is a gross misstep that does not fit the game series at all. I'm not saying I want the fight to be realistic, but I at least don't want them to be overly fantastical and trying really hard to be grandiose in scale. The final fights in Dead Rising so far have been great, because it wasn't a massive spectacle set piece. It was just an interesting location and a setting that provided the grounds for the final confrontation. And that final confrontation itself was just a final fistfight between two people with opposing goals. The grandiosity of it came from the final clash of two opposing worldviews in a normal and human way. The Stacy robot fight isn't that. It's an attempt to be a grand finale and be big in spectacle, and I can respect the time and effort that went to model and code and make this whole fight, but it just does not fit in Dead Rising. It's not even that engaging, it's actually fucking boring. If you told someone that the fat fuck chef was a more engaging and exciting fight than the giant park robot, they'd look at you like you're a fucking psychopath. You get it? I think it boils down to the fact that this fight feels so much like a video game boss fight. Do you understand what I mean? Like, every Psychopath fight up until this point hasn't felt like that. At least for me. But nothing about it really screams that it wants you to know that. It's effectively just a rough slugfest until somebody dies. Compared to the robot, you know, that has the big fucking health bar at the bottom of the screen, you know, the big giant blue fucking hit me here sections, multiple phases, trying really hard to be a big payoff. Do you see what I mean when I say it's a video game boss fight?
And yeah, I do remember that the final fight in Case West against Harjit Singh also had multiple health bars, but that can be kind of excused because I'm actually fighting the fucking guy, not a giant robot that he's controlling and then doing a QTE to give myself the illusion of fighting in gameplay. No, I'm fucking fighting the guy.
So yeah, I don't like this fight. I think it misses the mark by a country fucking mile and is so tonally dissonant to what Dead Rising is really about. Of course, the biggest addition that everyone's been asking for since Dead Rising 1 is Sandbox mode.
No way, pal. I'm not here for work. This is my vacation!
It's exactly what you think. No timer, no limits, no missions. You are free to do whatever you want at your own pace. Any PP or money you gain in Sandbox mode can be carried over to the story mode, and there are a wide variety of challenges for you to partake in that reward you with money, PP, and combo cards. Much like Infinity mode from 1, hostile survivors will spawn at random and killing them will grant you some money and whatever weapon they were holding. Psychopaths can also spawn in at the designated areas at certain times as well. Sandbox mode is a really nice addition, but I also think it really perfectly shows why Sandbox mode doesn't work for a game like Dead Rising. There is really nothing to do. Of course, there are the challenges, but if you're not a fan of them, then there's really nothing else. Dead Rising works so well because it can function as a sandbox type game in the main story mode and still give you things to do as you go on. If you really wanted to, you could fail the main story as soon as possible and then just use that as sandbox mode, and the game will still give you missions to do, like survivors to rescue and so on. The sandbox mode doesn't have this. It's just killing zombies. If that is exactly what you wanted, I'm happy for you. But without the timer or really any objectives, it gets boring pretty quickly. Dead Rising is at its best when you're juggling between the timer, exploration, and missions. Removing 2 of these 3 elements doesn't really make for an engaging experience. This is true for all sandbox type games, but Dead Rising suffers the most because the formula basically relies on the timer, and removing it breaks what makes it work. Infinity mode from 1 was essentially sandbox mode, but that worked because there was still a timer, yourself. I get that people really wanted this forever, but I don't think they stopped to realize that it couldn't just be a normal sandbox mode. It actually needed to give you something to do. Again, the challenges are there, but if you're not a fan of them, then it's just killing zombies. Zombie slaying can't really carry sandbox mode, and that's all it really has. Let's be really honest right now. Without the timer or the missions, Dead Rising's gameplay is not complex enough to warrant a sandbox mode. Dead Rising's complexity doesn't come from its gameplay. It came from the fucking timer! How am I gonna get from point A to point B? There are 2 side missions I can probably do on the way, but there's a third one that's on the other side of the map that's going to run out if I don't get to it right now. But if I detour to that one, will I have enough time to get back and do the other 2 missions and then make it to point B? What if, when I get to point B, there is then a point C that I have to get to afterwards with no additional time? Do I have enough time to do all of this? That is already complex enough. Then you start exploring ways to beat the timer. What shortcuts can I take? What is the fastest path there? Do I make a quick step or do I grab a shopping cart to gain extra speed? That is where the real complexity of Dead Rising is. Juggling everything all at once. But like I said, take the timer and the missions away, what are you really left with? Come on, be honest. That's right, not a lot. Certainly not enough to carry a whole sandbox mode. Overall, Off the Record is a bit of a mixed bag for me. While it does some things well, in a lot of other areas it disappoints. Critics found little to rave about with Dead Rising 2 Off the Record, citing that it's only really good if you've never played a Dead Rising game before because it was sold at a budget price. But if you've already played 2, there's little reason to even pick up the game. Sure, the return of Frank West is fun, but it is literally the same game you already played with one extra area that it doesn't really even give you a lot of reason to go into in the first place. Critics also cite that there are really no improvements to the game. The core was still good, but there wasn't much done to improve upon it. And I agree. Off the Record is a far buggier experience than 2. And I don't even understand how.
What the fuck happened?
It's the same game running on the same engine. Off the Record is far more susceptible to glitches, brain-hurting bugs, and a softlock during Case 7.4 where the game will load eternally, which just doesn't happen in the original. This was all on PC for me, obviously, but the simple fact is that the same game running on the same engine in the same map, the same pretty much fucking everything, runs way worse for no discernible reason is just pathetic. Though to the general fanbase, Off the Record is cited as one of the best games in the franchise, as it's a bigger Dead Rising 2, and it brings back Frank West, and it has Sandbox mode. I can't blame anyone for thinking like that, but recommending Off the Record over the original 2 was probably more detrimental than you think. I didn't really want to talk a lot about Dead Rising 4 before we got to it, but I think it's important to bring up now because it helps my point. Dead Rising 4 was hated by the fanbase for a lot of reasons, predominantly its massive shift in gameplay from its predecessors. However, some other reasons as to why the game was hated so much relate to things like its overall less serious tone, a big wide open world with little to really do in it, and Frank West not acting at all like he is supposed to be portrayed as, with poor writing of the overall story to boot. Before you all fucking crucify me, I am not saying that Off the Record is the same quality as Dead Rising 4. No, I actually stayed awake playing Off the Record. But what I am saying is that there are a lot of elements of Dead Rising 4 that people hated that actually appeared here first. To be fair, some of the developers from Dead Rising 4 state that the writing of the story suffered so much as when Annie Reed left, they pretty much had to start from scratch. There is a lot more to talk about with the development of Dead Rising 4, but we'll get to that. My point is, a lot of the elements that you feel Dead Rising 4 had that killed the franchise actually appeared here first in Off the Record. And when it came time for the writers to redo Dead Rising 4, would it be so out of the question to say that they looked at the positive reception that Dead Rising 2 Off the Record got, took inspiration from it and dialed it up to 11? Off the Record is such an interesting game, because everyone praises it to high hell and back, but it's just the same game that they already played. There's not a lot different to it. I cannot blame Capcom Vancouver for capitalizing on the opportunity that they saw, but I really wonder how different this franchise would have been if Off the Record never got made. Or maybe if Capcom Japan never put them in the position where they needed to release another Dead Rising game within a year of the release of 2. For perspective, in just under 6 months, we had 3 Dead Rising games: Case Zero, Dead Rising 2, and Case West. Sure, the epilogue and prologue were far shorter, but the point still stands. Was this really not enough for Capcom? Off the Record's entire existence is due to a clause in a contract that was already asking so much of Capcom Vancouver. If this clause didn't exist, Off the Record never would have been made, and by extension, maybe Dead Rising 4 would have turned out to be a much different game. I don't want this video to come off as a "I hate Dead Rising 2 Off the Record and so should you" type video, but I want this series of videos to be an analysis and retrospective look at a franchise that I care so much about, finding what made it work so well and then finding where it all went so wrong, analyzing each game's themes and ideas, tone and characterization to find out exactly what the fuck happened to this franchise. And unfortunately, I think Off the Record is what happened. Its writing, tone, and characterization is a far cry from the original. We can say, oh, but it's not canon, therefore it can afford to be sillier all we want, but it is impossible to deny that the future of this franchise was greatly affected by Off the Record. And I don't think it was in a good way. But thankfully, we don't have to think about Dead Rising 4 just yet. But Dead Rising 3 has its own assemblage of issues that didn't really help either. I just get my I just get my pee-pee. Hope my feet haven't been showing in the video yet. It'd be really embarrassing if my feet were showing.